Welcome back, everybody. This is Acadius, and the first thing I want to do is to thank the few subscribers I have gotten so far. I am painfully aware that the quality of my videos are subpar at best, and to the few of you that have subscribed so far, thanks. It really means a lot to me. So, this video marks the start of an ongoing series that I want to make, where I make predictions on how well a game is going to do, and I talk about the little things that I look for in order to make informed purchases. Well, alrighty then. New World. Specifically, pre-launch New World information. What information did we have at our disposal that could have indicated to us that it was going to have issues? So, when I started looking at New World, my first impression was that it wouldn't do very well. In fact, I was convinced that it would suck. At the time, I was only looking at two categories, the setting and the three-way PvP based combat, which is the core of the game. In hindsight, I should have also looked at the lead devs for the game as well, but it wouldn't have changed my opinion at the time, only solidified it. First, let's take a look at the setting. An island is discovered inside a magical windstorm barrier, which seemingly wrecks every ship that goes through it. Then how did the knowledge spread of the island? It's like the age-old question, if no one survived, then how are you telling me this story? It's a whole new world that's a hidden island that's the size of a continent, so basically Australia. Maybe they should have just called the game New Australia. That probably would have made more sense. Now, the game is set during the Conquistador era, which occurred during the 15th and 16th centuries. They were basically sanctioned pirates. On behalf of their investors, they conquer natives of other lands for treasure and glory. Interesting choice, Amazon. Preach inclusivity while placing the player in the shoes of murdering slavers who do it on the behalf of mega corporations and insanely rich businessmen. You know, I'm sure there's a joke to be made here, but I just don't have the heart to make it. Also, I really don't like the look of Conquistador armor. That's just me personally. I know some people dig it, but those people ain't me. I just never like when my fantasy game starts tying into real world events. You know, like I just want to be immersed. I want my fantasy games to have as little to do with the real world as possible. So this was the first thing that I considered. The next was the three-way PvP system. So, three-way PvP systems in MMOs date all the way back to Dark Age of Camelot. There have been several more three-way PvP games released since then, and we will be taking a look at them briefly to see how they fared. Champions of Regnum is an Argentine MMO that released in 2012 and has 25 or 27 average players. Honestly, when you've got that few amount of players, who gives a shit? Gloria Victis is an MMO from Poland that released in 2016 and has 340 average players, and we'll be referencing that one a little bit later. RF Online is a Korean MMORPG that released in December 2004. Currently sits at about 630 average players. The game I mentioned previously, Dark Age of Camelot, is an American MMO that released in 2001 and is currently at around 6,000 average players. Fun fact, 6,000 players is currently 3 times as much as the 2,000 peak players of Mortal Online 2. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, Henrik the dumbass. And finally, Elder Scrolls Online is another American MMO, and it has 15,000 average players. So the absolute best example of a three-way PvP MMO still only has around 15,000 players. So there wasn't a doubt in my mind that New World was going to struggle because Daok struggled. And I played Daok back when it came out. And so has every other three-way PvP MMO that has come after it. The issue is one part game balance and one part psychological. Now, I'm no psychologist, but you don't need a degree to understand these problems. Everyone wants to be able to join whatever faction they want, but if you allow them to do that with no restrictions, then you end up having one faction that is way bigger than the other two. You also end up having one faction that is way smaller than the other two. And if you force players to join factions in order to balance them out, you get upset players and seemingly never-ending stalemates. So in the process of making this video, I actually stumbled across a post made by a person who claims to be a dev for Gloria Victis, who explained the psychology of it all pretty well, I thought. Let's see what they had to say. In Gloria Victis, we have 3-faction PvP. We started with 2 and we moved to 3. 2 sides was difficult to keep balanced, and we thought 3 sides might add in a spoilers so that one side doesn't get destroyed. Which is funny because apparently what they're thinking here is, oh well, we have trouble balancing 2-sided PvP, so let's make it even more complicated for us by adding in a 3rd side. These people eat paint chips. Anyways, they continue. Does it work? Kinda. Not without additional incentives and hard limits on population at events or in the open world for the 2 larger nations not to pile on the 3rd. The strongest nation, red, will attack the weakest nation, yellow, because it's an easy win. Maybe they will attack the second strongest nation, blue, as well. For the most part, NA is locked into a situation where perpetually, season after season, red wins the leaderboards, blue is next, and yellow is last. Yes, there have been some times when this has changed, but overall, this is the meta situation of our server. The second nation, if they accurately understand the strength of the strongest nation, will soon divert to hiding from the strongest and begin attacking the weakest nation if they lose to the strongest nation. It's the path of least resistance. The weakest nation gets slammed from both sides regularly. Sometimes blue and yellow do attack and get wins, but for the most part, we always settle back in a situation where red is the main dominant force. A weak nation is going to lose. People like to win, so they go where they can get wins. Once they get a win, they want to continue, which means the other sides have to lose again and again. And this has, in my opinion, always been the biggest issue with three-way PvP and MMOs. I feel like adding a third faction sounds great. You know, on paper, it sounds wonderful. But ends up only creating that much more work for the devs trying to balance the game. And that is time and effort that could be put elsewhere. So between the super weird Conquistador setting and armor, as well as the terrible track record for three-way faction PvP MMOs and the difficulty balancing them, I was convinced that it was more likely that New World would fail than succeed. Now, in hindsight, I could have looked into the devs leading the project and known for sure. Let's quickly take a look. Scott Lane, the lead guy, the one you've seen the most, has no MMO experience and very little experience with RPGs. Most notable is BG Dark Alliance 2. David Ferfaley has no RPG experience or MMO experience, but he did work on Killer Instinct. David Hall also has no RPG or MMO experience, but he worked on Killer Instinct. Michael Willett, once again, has no RPG or MMO experience, but at least he also worked on Killer Instinct, right? Weird that so many lead developers that worked on Killer Instinct together, and none of them have any MMO or RPG experience, and yet they all got hired in lead positions to work on a $200 million project together. Very strange. And the lead guy, Scott Lane, only has a single RPG game under his belt, which was a hack and slash, and that game was back in 2004. And these are the people that Amazon puts its trust into, as well as $200 million.
We're rich! We're rich!
Sure, why not? Sounds like a safe bet to me. But don't get it twisted. I'm not blaming the devs. They did the best they could with the limited experience they had. At the end of the day, they got offered a job and they took it. And frankly, I'm insulted that you fine fellows would even think that someone like me would insult developers, especially after my last video. I am offended. So what? They got the job just because they were all friends who worked on Killer Instinct together instead of being the most qualified for their position, right? Forget about it. What I'm wondering is what kind of colossal moron would hire such an inexperienced team and then bet $200 million on them?
We're rich! We're rich! We're rich! We're rich!
And the answer is this fucking dipshit right here. Christoph Hartmann, Vice President of Amazon Games. Now, we all know how the hiring process works. Filling out job applications, disclosing prior work history, building resumes. And this guy, Chris Hartmann, Vice President of Neanderthals, saw their lack of relevant game dev experience and thought to himself, well, they made Killer Instinct, so they're definitely the right people for the job. There's no way our game will be bad with this dream team working for us. Stand aside, World of Warcraft, because New World is coming through. Yeah, right. At any rate, I will be using factors such as these, like and such as these, to try and predict how well some games will do in the future. I think making predictions is fun, and it certainly makes it more exciting when a game launches and you find out if you're right or wrong, and to what degree. Join me in my next video, where I make my very first prediction. Will the Dune MMO be any good? And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.